Hello everyone, I'm Zach Smith. I'm the Director of Communications for the City of Forney, and I am joined by Forney Police Department Police Chief Carrie White. Carrie, first of all, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
So I just want to start off with, go into your background just a little bit, how you got involved in policing and why did you choose to apply to be with the Forney Police Department?
Sure. So I've been in policing for about 22 years now, a little over 22 years. 21 of that was spent in North Richland Hills, which is on the other side of the Metroplex, which is like a mid-sized agency. So at any given time we had between 100 to 110 officers. Now I think they're a little bit more than that right now. But while I was there, I had a very blessed career. So I did a lot of great things. I got involved in a lot of different aspects of policing. I was involved with SWAT for almost 15 years. I did a little bit of training coordinator position. I did internal affairs. So I was really blessed with a very well-rounded career, which kind of brought me here to Forney. And one of the attractions to Forney, of course, is that it's a growing community and it's also a growing agency. And for me, that seemed like a challenge. And if you know anything about me, my personality loves challenges, so that's one of the things that I looked forward to. And on top of that, there's just some great people here, and that was the reason why I chose Forney. So.
Okay. So you're coming up on a year with being with this agency, which is kind of crazy that it's already been a year.
It's
but
fast.
so what are some things that you have been working on, some things you've already implemented as police chief?
Sure. So a few things. We've been working on a lot of things internally. One of the things I noticed when I first got here is that the foundation needed to be a little bit stronger. So we dealing with a lot of policy revisions and things along that lines, because we do want to get accredited by the Texas Police Chiefs Association. So that's our goal for this coming year, is to get that accreditation. And in order to do that, you have to have very strong policies. But not only do you have to have strong policies, but you have to have a culture of following policy. So that's what we're doing right now. We're kind of tweaking those as we go. At the same time, though, because the community is growing so much and because the agency needs to grow, we actually looked into doing a staffing study. So we got that accomplished last year around August or September, but with all the revisions, the final copy didn't come out until actually last month. So one of the things that we did with that staffing study is it tells us what we need to do in the next 5 years, right? How many officers do we need to hire for the next 5 years? And also animal control, because animal control falls under me too as well. So he looked at all aspects. I hired a third party to come in and do that. He looked at the growth of the community, he looked at the population growth, and then he looked at how many officers we currently have, how many animal control operators we currently have, and he came up with a pretty large number that we need to kind of focus on in the next 5 years. So now it comes the planning, right? So I have the numbers, now it comes the planning. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now, so that I can show the City Council what that looks like. It's kind of my job to show them that plan to help with the staffing and what I think. So that's really has taken up a lot of our time. I had a lot of my deputy chiefs kind of help me with that. So that we kind of all sat as a group, as a command staff, and kind of looked at that as a wide perspective of what we need to do. Now comes the time to get in front of the council and get in front of my boss and the city manager and let them know, here's what I think we need and here's how we get here. And that's going to take, that took some time. So that took a lot of time. I didn't expect it to take that much time, but then again, I've this is my first chief job.
Right.
So that kind of struck me as a number crunching. But that's okay, because I love doing those kind of things. So, and then some of the other things that we've implemented too, we are starting now to look at more community events to get involved in community engagement. We haven't really done that historically here in Forney. Every once in a while we will get involved with the community, but it needs to be a very consistent basis. So it has to be more of a community policing philosophy. So that's the direction that the department's going right now. District policing comes to mind, or they call it geographical policing. So what is that? That is when an officer is going to be restricted to certain areas of the town, certain areas of the city to patrol actively, and to be in that part of the community, meet the community members, and have a district officer that someone can call and say, hey, in this area, these things are happening. And it just makes communication flow a little bit better with the community. So that's kind of our goal now, but we've kind of started that gradually going that direction right now.
Okay, that's really interesting. And there's a couple things you mentioned that I want to touch on. So obviously you have a need to increase your staff.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a seems like a challenging time to recruit and go out and get officers. What's like your approach there? And you've mentioned in the past about, placing an emphasis on diversifying your workforce. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, certainly. So one of the things that did attract me to 42 as well is a diverse community. Honestly, I mean, there's a lot of diversity in this particular part of the community, and it's growing to the point where there's I came from an agency that was very landlocked. It wasn't going anywhere really.
Right.
And diversity was reflective of the community. Yes, of the law enforcement of the agency was reflective of the community. Yes, and I think we need to do that here too. I think we need to be focused on those portions of the community that they like to see. You can't be what you can't see. So one of the things that I'd like to do is actually send folks out to the recruiting trips. And now that a lot of that's been virtual the last couple of years because of COVID, and that's probably why we haven't participated in the past. But I think now that things are starting to open up a little bit, it's sending people to recruiting trips. And when you send people to those recruiting trips, we want someone that's well educated on the Forney community to go and do that. And I have a lot of officers that are willing to do that, so that's great. But I also want to make sure that they show an equal amount of African American officers, an equal amount of female officers, an equal amount of Hispanic officers, even Native American officers. All of those things for which the community in Forney is saturated with. Those are the folks that need to be out there policing. And that's what we're going to focus on. So we're going to focus hard and heavy on recruiting, and actually they call it direct recruiting. What does that mean? I think part of it is African American community. I think if we start directly recruiting them, maybe going to some black colleges and actually recruiting actively at those colleges, and kind of researching that and the best way to get involved to make sure that we're recruiting those that reflect the community. So that is a target of mine is to improve that, and the guys here at the PD are very much on board with that, and that's the fantastic part about that. They know that, and they also know that they're growing. So there's no better time to implement those recruiting changes as to when you're starting to hire more people. So you'll see that probably quite a bit. You did a recruiting video for us, and we focused on females and some of that. And then, of course, at the other end of that, too, is, okay, let's focus on another demographic of the community. And you and I will get together and we'll do that, too, as well. So
look forward to it. So you also mentioned community policing, and you've kind of touched on that a little bit, but why is that so important in policing? Because
the community is going to help us in different ways. So the community itself is important for information for us, to be honest with you. They are not going to call us as a member of the Forney Police Department unless they can trust us. And the only way that we can improve on that trust, because we do have a great relationship with the community, don't get me wrong, but you want to improve on that. So how do you do that? Well, you get them actively involved in maybe, Crime Stoppers, or you get them actively involved in, National Night Out, or you get them actively involved in a way that they feel like they're making a difference with you too as well. So it's almost in partnership, if you will. And that's kind of what community policing does in my mind. Community engagement is extremely important. So you engage with that community so they can trust to call you when they know something's wrong in the community. That trust goes both ways too. So I think that is really what the basic philosophy is, but it also helps because we want to get a message out to folks.
Right.
We have a CPA, or Citizens Police Academy, that fills up, every quarter or so. We get to put on a class, and those folks that attend that class go out and they teach what we do, and that's kind of great. I'm looking at an initiative right now that would actually do a junior police academy. And that was one thing that I wanted to do. In fact, I just reached out to a couple folks here to say, hey, I need you to get a hold of Irving PD, who does one. I need you to get a hold of Waco PD, that does one. And I'll reach out to the chiefs respectively to say, hey, how did you do this? Because in Forney, that would be great. We've seen an increase in juvenile crime. And I think everybody knows that. And it is unique in Kaufman County. A lot of the other counties have juvenile holding facilities, and we don't necessarily have that. So sometimes that causes a problem with us, where to take the juveniles from. But if you have, a community that trusts you, a community that involves the youth in the community, we're trying to deter them from doing the crime, right? Maybe I can't send them somewhere because they've, because we don't have a holding facility, or I send them pretty far out. But I could certainly try to deter crime and to maybe steer them in a different direction so they don't want to do that crime. And one of the things I wanted to do was a youth or a junior Citizens Police Academy. I would teach them what we do, and get them actively involved at an early age, and hopefully deter them from that lifestyle.
Right.
Yeah.
maybe get them interested in policing and have you.
Oh, that'd be
join the
fantastic.
department.
There has been. I've had a couple people in the Citizens Police Academy that were, I say young, in their 20s and in their 30s, and all of a sudden you spark an interest in them, and then they apply. And that's kind of what I want to do here too as well. The last Citizens Police Academy, we did have a couple folks that were interested in not just policing, but law enforcement altogether, policing altogether, which is like communications, records, detention. I had a lot of folks that were, really motivated to take a look at what Forney PD as a whole has to offer. And that's what those classes do for you. Now I want to do it for younger generations.
Right.
So, yeah.
And you mentioned Citizens Police Academy. You've kind of evolved that program a little bit since you've been here. Could you touch on that? Yeah.
So one of the things that that the International Association of Chiefs of Police is an organization that is very well known for police chiefs to kind of kick around ideas with one another. So one of the things that came up years ago that was implemented at my prior agency was a volunteers in police services. And what is that? So when I got here, it was fantastic because they did have a COP program, a Citizens on Patrol program. But that kind of limits your volunteers to just patrolling, right? So one of the things I wanted to do is evolve that program into a volunteers in police service as well. Because there's a lot of things in the building that they could volunteer for, like not too long ago, we had to suspend our notary service. And the reason for that is because we need stronger policies to make sure that we were doing and notarizing the right things. Right. We're about to kick that off again to the public. But the only problem is now is that everybody's so busy doing everything. So our volunteers have actually volunteered to be notaries for us on certain days of the week. So that'll be coming within the next few months. We'll be bringing back that service, and our volunteers and police services will be the ones that are actually notarizing those things under certain criteria. They'll be doing that, and it sounds minuscule, but it does take manpower to file paperwork, to go paperless, which is what I'm trying to do too as well. We have a lot of records downstairs that need to be scanned. We'll certify certain volunteers to do that, and they'll end up actually scanning some of those copies for us. And that way it takes away from having to do, the records technicians from having to do their other job too as well. So they're it's in its younger stages right now, but we graduated our first class and they're very excited to get going. Now, if I could get the renovation downstairs done, then that's when I'll start actually doing some more of those other things that's for the volunteers. So
fantastic. And folks interested in that program, they can go to our website, forneytx.gov/VIPs. So you can find more information about that. You just touched on some renovation downstairs. Yeah. So what do you have going on downstairs?
Okay, so our dispatch center, our communications center, was pretty small when I first got here. And staffing is going to dictate the fact that we get bigger down there. So what we did, and it was started before I even got here, so let's just say that, they saw that before I even arrived here. So my command staff saw it well before I got here. The only thing I did was maybe kickstart a few things. So what we're doing downstairs is actually almost doubling in size the communications center, because we've gone from 2 dispatchers on duty at any given time, sometimes 3, and those are going to be upped now at this point because we are dispatching now for Forney ISD Police Department too. So we need more personnel. So we needed more room. And it looks fantastic. We're going to have a grand opening when it's all said and done. The major construction is done already. We're waiting for some IT things to develop and to get done. And then we'll be, it'll be great when we move in. So that's one thing, kind of help with that. And then the next thing is the women's locker room. We are hiring more female officers, which is fantastic. That's good news. And then the bad news is you're hiring more female officers because now you have to make more space for them. So that's what we're doing. In fact, you might hear it now here and there in the video, but they're actually knocking down some walls right now in the women's locker room to accommodate for that. So it's good times. It's good stuff.
A lot of stuff going on. And another thing I've noticed since you've been here is you really have prioritized going out and getting grants for public safety. Yeah. That's definitely been an initiative for you and the city's grants coordinator. Yeah. Can you talk about some of the things you've been able to do with that?
Sure, absolutely. So when I first got here, we didn't have Mr. Nicholas Nix, who is our grant coordinator. So I ended up writing a grant because I saw a gap, and that gap was in some of the response tools that patrol officers have. So when you respond to a critical call for service, you should have all the proper equipment. We didn't have a lot of money to do that up until this point. So I reached out out and I saw the governor's office threw out a bulletproof shield grant. So we applied for it, and I crossed my fingers, and lo and behold, we got it. So we were able to actually outfit. In fact, they're out there right now. We just put them in the cars a couple days ago. Each car is outfitted with a bulletproof shield that was paid for through grant money in the governor's office. So that's fantastic. Nicholas Nix is also kind of helping us to write grants for other pieces of equipment too that are very expensive. So our body-worn cameras, he's looking into that. He and I are working very closely together for our bulletproof vests that officers wear. They get, they're pretty expensive, and they continue to grow in price. So we had to find alternative means to pay for those things. So those you want to save the city money too. I mean, they got other departments that need funding too as well. So we need to be cognizant of how we spend, but we need to be cognizant of what money is out there that's free. So he and I are actually looking all the time for more grant stuff. In my background, I had a grant background because I managed grants in my previous city. I'm not real great at writing grants, which is great. Why I'm thankful that Nicholas is here. But at the same time, we will keep searching for that because there are plenty of grants out there that can help us. We also applied for recently a personnel grant. So the community services or community policing philosophies that we talked about, I want to start a community services section. To do that, you need people. And one of the options that was out there is a COPS grant, is what they call it. We applied for a COPS grant for 2 positions. And those positions will be community services. And what they'll do is they'll organize and structure all the community engagement activities. And that's really what we need here, to be honest with you. We also are getting some personnel through our Texas Anti-Gang partnership that we have with the TAG, they call it TAG, Texas Anti-Gang Program. They awarded us, a sergeant and an officer to participate in our task force that we're doing through the county. So that was another thing that we saved on to as well via grants. And grants, as long as I have somebody to help me with them, are a fantastic way to kind of supplement your funding. So.
That's great. So you just touched on, the anti-gang task force with Kaufman County. How have you been able to collaborate with partnering or surrounding agencies? Yeah,
I think one of the things that I believe wholeheartedly in, and that's how I was raised as an officer, is don't silo yourself as an agency to just this area. You have to rely and work in collaborative methods with everybody that's around you. So those partnerships mean a lot to me. And as soon as I got here, that very week, I met with the district attorney. Her and I sat down and we talked to each other about our philosophies and what we believe and what we think. And I told her about my background a little bit. Shortly after getting here, I got here in June, obviously, of last year. Probably about November or December, there was an increase in some gun violence in Forney. And I did a little bit of research to make sure the numbers were, okay, has it always been this way? Because I wouldn't know. Or is this a new trend that's going on? And it looked like crime was evolving a little bit. I know that Jason Johnson with Precinct 2 has some personnel with him that actually know a lot about gangs. I know the district attorney was kind of worried that the gang activity was dipping into the juvenile side of things too, because that was going up a little bit. And Sheriff Beavers is always wanting and looking for new ideas. So when that increase happened to me in this part of Forney, I asked them, because the initiative, the gang task force is what it was called at the time. It's the street crimes task force now at this point. It's a more fitting name. We always knew we were going to do that because we sat down collectively and thought, how do we help the juvenile crime in this area? How do we actually make a difference there? So we knew we were going to do that initiative. It just happened sooner, a lot sooner than I anticipated, and it was directly related to the gun crime here. When coming from that side of the Metroplex, I'm familiar with that type of crime, but I'm also familiar with trends, right? And you never want to trend in that direction. And when you do, you can't sit on your hands and do nothing. I mean, you have to do something. So I called the district attorney, called the sheriff, I called Jason Johnson. I said, can we start this earlier than we thought, earlier than we anticipated? And they were all on board. So eventually it came out to be at first it was the gang task force, the Kaufman County Gang Task Force. We just thought a better fitting name would be a street crimes task force. That way you don't limit yourself to just gangs to dip into the neighborhoods and just kind of fight those type of criminal activities. So what we did is we called it the street crimes. And it's in full force. And it started on May 1st. Started on May 1st with honestly an immediate call for service to help the county with something. I currently have one officer over there right now. Once TAG comes through with some of that Texas Anti-Gang Task Force gang program, comes forth with some more funding, I'm going to send a sergeant over there to help supervise that group. But also to make sure that the Forney interests are vetted too in that task force, because that is a great tool and it has been thus far. And it only started a month ago, almost 2 months ago now at this point. But they have done a lot of great activity over there. So
that's very interesting. That sounds like good news. It's great that you guys are being proactive in the community.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier one of probably the biggest challenges with what you're facing is the growth and the fact that you need staff to accommodate that. What are some other challenges that come along with growth as far as like our city and our area?
So I think the biggest thing is traffic. I've noticed the infrastructure here is a lot different than where I came from. Traffic enforcement is important. It helps with traffic accidents, to be honest with you. If you're out there actively enforcing traffic laws, people tend to pay attention to that. And maybe, just maybe, will have a deterrent effect on the person that wants to speed or the person that wants to run through the stop sign. I think that traffic section is going to be a big impact on the community in a good way. And you never want to have too many traffic accidents, but we do have a lot here because of the infrastructure. So how do I help with that? I help with that with putting more people on the street that can actually focus on traffic enforcement. And that's kind of the route I want to take with the traffic. That's one thing. And then the evolution of the crime. Right. If you don't get on top of that or have a proactive approach to the crime, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. And they didn't hire me here in Forney to be behind the 8 ball. So one of the things I want to do is proactively look at, in an analysis type of way, what kind of crime is trending? Where is it trending at? We just had a whole slew of stolen vehicles, a certain brand, a certain model of vehicle. Saying that, then you put more folks out on the street. The tough part for me, the challenging part for me, is I'm having to do a lot of overtime to do that. Because I did put folks on the street at the end of school, because at the end of school, we had a couple groups of teens that were having fun. Don't get me wrong, and then you had a couple other folks that were not having fun and were just maybe causing a little bit of trouble. So we had to. That's normal, though. That's normal in any community. So I won't talk like it's not normal. But my job was to address that. So what do? I had to actually pay overtime for extra folks to be on the street. And the wonderful part about that are the officers were willing to work the weekend over a long stretch of hours to make sure we had extra staffing. So I can't pull from staffing on the street to address a huge problem like that. And that's my mentality. So like the shootings the gun violence that we experienced in November and December, I put a detail together. I said, okay, guys, and it was terrible because it was over Thanksgiving. But the guys were more than willing to do it, and they went out there and they collected the data that I needed, and they made a deterrent effect. The problem is, of course, because of staffing reasons, the challenge, overtime gets accumulated because of that. So that's the one thing to say.
Okay. Is there anything else that you want to touch on? You mentioned you want to increase staffing. Is there any other initiatives, maybe even that's longer term down the road, that you have in mind?
Yeah, I'm finding very quickly that I'm growing out of this building. So, if you look at the staffing study and the strategic plan that I have, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to fit everybody in this building. I'm going to do the best I can, because you never want to cost the taxpayers any extra money that they didn't anticipate.
Right.
And I wouldn't want to do that. So I'm making the best make of all the space in here as I can, but eventually that may be a problem for us. The staffing study in and of itself is recommending, I should say, that we double in size. Well, if we double in size, I don't know where I'm going to put everybody, to be honest with you. But when we double in size too, that's going to be great for the community. So I'm very excited and very happy about that. But that initiative is going to be in my brain. How do I make the best of all the space I have here? And do I need to think about someplace else too? I don't know. Like, where else am I going to put all of these folks? But we'll wait and see how it goes too. But I think the biggest thing for me in this year especially is the staffing. Improve that a little bit, right? and make sure that the officers are getting the equipment they need, the training that they need, via grants if I can. Staffing, I'll go through grants if I can too there. But the other side of that too is community policing. I want that to be a philosophy here. That is my goal here. Sooner than later, hopefully, and not further down the road, but sooner than later, and with staffing, everything, improving, I think we can get there. And it's just going to take some time. The frustrating part about me is I'm very ambitious, and so are a lot of my folks that are with me right now. My command staff is ready to go and ready to implement some of these things. Now it's a matter of, okay, now pace yourself, because you want to do it right. Right. You don't want to throw it out there and it kind of snowballing and just be a downhill from there. No. We need to do it right. So the best way to do that is a strong foundation. I believe wholeheartedly that this agency is going to be successful if that foundation is strong. Because if it's not, it doesn't matter how many people you give me. The foundation is cracked, it's going to crumble. If you give me 20 more people, I'm not going to do the citizens any good. So that's our main focus is, community policing, policy foundation, things along that lines, things that make us stronger. Sure.
Awesome. Well, it seems like you're really busy. So
yeah.
I don't have any other questions. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I'm just excited for the future of Forney. I really am, and I think everybody in my building, I can say, is actually into that vision and that mission, and they've bought into that, and that's a fantastic feeling. It took a while because I came from the outside. So when you come from the outside, and to their credit, because I've been in their shoes before, where someone comes from the outside, you know nothing about them. So when I first got here, I met with every single employee and got to know them a little bit, and since then I've built some pretty good, strong bonds with them, and they are my people, and now I just need to get them more people, and we'll be good. So.
Well, fantastic. Excited for the outlook of Forney and the Forney Police Department. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. Thank you all so much for watching.